Welcome to Ellig Group's webinar series, where we invite subject matter experts to speak on issues that are important to all of our clients and colleagues, especially in today's world. So I am really delighted to have Davia Temin of Temin & Company join us to speak on leading through chaos, how to build trust in an untrusty world. And she is an expert on the topic, having received a Lifetime Achievement Award from Trust Across America, Trust Around the World, and the 5th consecutive year top thought leader in trust. So she is definitely an expert on this subject. Davia started her consultancy firm in 1997 after a successful marketing career with GE Capital, Schroders, Scudder Stevenson Clark, Citigroup, as well as Columbia University. She's a spokesperson for companies and to many CEOs, an advisor and communications coach on marketing, media, reputational management, and crisis management issues. She's a strategic partner with Ellig Group, and she's been a dear colleague and friend for over 2 decades. I don't want to say that again, though. But it's been our pleasure to know each other so long, and you are truly an expert in this matter, and so I welcome you today to talk about how do we navigate and how does one lead through you're talking about chaos. Is it chaos or is it a crisis? Where are we, Davia? Tell us where we are today.
Janice, first of all, it is a pleasure and a delight to be here. I love talking about this topic. I wish we weren't all right in the middle of it. I wish that we could be doing this on, in an armchair over a scotch when there wasn't a problem. But it becomes even more critical when it is. And there are lessons that we can learn. Today, everybody really thinks of themselves as a crisis manager because every one of us is leading through crisis right now. The problem is that if this is the only crisis you've been in, or there are only a couple that you've been in where you've been leading, you can learn lessons from those, but it is very dangerous to extrapolate lessons to other crises only from the ones you've been in before, because you could get the wrong lessons and you could learn the wrong lessons, apply them in another situation, and actually double down on your problem. So that's why crisis is, if you will, and I just want to point out, these are some of our resources that you can get. We are strategic partners of Ellig Group and proud to be that. You can look at the Temin & Company website, teminandco.com, and you can get these articles on crisis leadership. When does global crisis turn into chaos? Chaos rules, 8 ways to navigate through the fog of crisis, and communicating how to build trust in an untrustworthy world. So what we've tried to do is put all of these 3 into where we are now. So where are we now? I believe that we are teetering between crisis and chaos. What does that mean? Crisis is one problem. Chaos is a million of them superimposed. We have a pandemic. We have a market free fall. We have soaring unemployment. We have complete uncertainty. We have supply chain instability. We have people getting sick. We have people dying. We don't always have complete confidence in our global leadership or our country leadership or our state leadership for that matter. So how do we work in that? At that point, we start to be on the brink between an understandable, logical world, which can be a crisis, whether it's a black swan or a whole flock of them. They're knowledgeable. Chaos, however, is a state of extreme confusion and disorder. It's a formless state of matter that before the cosmos was even started. And it is a system that will develop in wildly different ways if there are just some minor differences at the very beginning of the situation. Does that sound familiar to you? A butterfly flaps its wings in China and we all die. All right, so what we've got here,
this is a world crisis. I mean, have we ever had any situation where the whole world was going through, and the economic freefall, as you said, is just we don't even know the impact of that going forward.
That's right. It's stunning. So yes, I mean, we had the Spanish flu crisis in 1918. We had polio epidemics that were worldwide, and we have had world wars, right? But still, in world wars even, there was some place to hide. Excuse me. There was always some place to hide. In today's world, with these pathogens being the enemy, there is no place to hide. So therefore, in a crisis situation, what you retain is causality. I have a fairly good idea that if I do X, Y will happen. So for example, my plant has a fire. I have a fairly good idea that if I call the fire department, if they start to deploy the fire retardant and the water, if they cordon everything else out, if I get my people out in time and I have good systems and I have good backup systems, the fire will go out, we will rebuild, and we will go back to normal. That's causality. We have an idea that if somebody gets sick, you can test them to see how sick they are. You can tell them to self-isolate, or you can get them to the hospital where there is plenty of paraphernalia for people to take, and knowledge for people to take care of them, and ventilators if they get worse. That's causality. In chaos, causality is broken. You have no assurance that if you do A, B will result. If you do A, M could result. It's all mixed up, and all of the strands of the various crises intermix until it's a murky and dense mixture. So crisis retains causality and logic, experience, leadership, strategy, and swift, wise action can work to mitigate these crises. Leadership and experience do not work as well in chaos because it's less predictable. So the question, as we teeter on the brink, the first thing, of course, is we try not to go into chaos. We try to just keep it as a crisis that we can manage. What happens when it turns? What happens when we start to come back to work around this country and around the world? And what Dr. Fauci has said is probably going to happen is it comes back. And what happens if it comes back? Twice as bad, which is a possibility. What happens if it comes back in a morphed state? What happens if there are a million of these things. You can drive yourselves crazy. But what you do have to do is not go into denial that it's not happening. And that's my first rule of crisis management, deny denial. And then you have to look closely at what the reality is and face into that wind. Okay, so let's talk about what works in chaos.
Davia, this morning or noontime, Governor Cuomo was on, and he was saying that, every time you look at a problem and you fix that, another problem can develop, which is happening. It's like problem after problem. So MTA workers getting sick because, of the closeness of proximity of people. Do you close down the MTA? You can't do that. Essential workers have to get to work. They have to use the buses. So how do you solve for that? So now they're going to disinfect between 1 and 5 a.m. every day, the mass transit. But then will another problem happen? So he's saying this, it's a problem. You think A is going to happen, then B is going to happen? Not necessarily.
Not necessarily. I mean, it is a little bit like a very horrid game of whack-a-mole. One thing comes up, you get it, you get another one. Then in crisis, they're all coming up at the same time, and you can't very often tell the ground from the sky. It is upside down. Down is up is down, topsy-turvy. You can't tell how you're oriented. Flyers find this in fog kinds of situations. Like, they actually lose their bearing on what's up and what's down. So the question, and in what I call, they call it the fog of war when you're in a war.
Right.
I call it the fog of crisis. And that is one definition of chaos. So how do you manage this? How do you operate? How do you navigate in a fog? How do you navigate? I say that when all external compasses are no longer showing you a reliable direction, our own moral compass must kick in. And that is more directional. True north becomes a sense of integrity courage, and intention. In fact, aspiration, intention, purpose, and compassion can be the things that also go into true north. Those are the things that you divine by, you go toward. When, the details may not be working the way you want them to be, but your intention can drive you. So this beacon is followed by others. It prizes kindness and compassion. It rejects, see if any of this seems familiar to you, it rejects narcissism, self-dealing, drama, liars, and cowardice. It creates trust by putting people first without destroying the systems and the companies that have always supported us and will again. True chaos leadership rests on an inner sense of morality and direction in the face of utter pandemonium. And I know as I coach CEOs, and I do a lot, the best of them are putting these and more best practices into operation now, so that their employees and every one of their stakeholder constituencies can actually have an aspirational roadmap of how to go. And they learn how to become the trusted audience, the trusted voice in the room. And that's what they have to become, is the trusted voice in the room. So here, very quickly, because then we'll talk and that's going to be more fun, are just a few. Here are 8 chaos rules. You want to become the trusted voice in the room. In other words, you deliver bad news. You deliver good news. You do this with compassion, but you do it as a field general. You do it with knowledge, expertise, and kindness. Over-communicate, doing so authentically as well. So of course, in 2008, I worked with a CEO, and she was extraordinary in how she over-communicated. First of all, she went around the world to every one of her 27 offices, headquarters around the world, and she had town halls with them. In fact, people said, well, I actually felt better knowing that you felt you could leave the headquarters because you felt things were going on. That was 1. 2, and she answered every question. She stayed until every question was done. 2, overnight, she had the economists work on the bullet points for what their point of view was of what was going on. By 6 in the morning, that was on the desk of every employee, or the desktop of every employee in the whole organization. So that when every employee talked to his or her customers or clients or vendors or stakeholders, they would have a hymn book, they would be talking about it, they would be in sync, it would be well rationalized, they would be coordinated together, and the next day it would be something else. So this kind of over communication, and by the way, then she would have 2 different briefings every morning, one for her crisis team and then one later for her executive team and others. There was over communication, and they would stay until every question was answered. Okay, that makes you the trusted voice in the room. And basically that is what I would call, and Janice, you brought it up, embracing the Cuomo effect. Channeling Andrew Cuomo. Here is the voice of authority because he's informed, because he's smart, because he's on top of every detail. He is going to wrangle that beast, whatever it is, down. If there need to be more ventilators, he's going to get it. And you trust him. Compare that to some of the other situations that we're dealing with. Okay. Also, you need to know that this is a marathon run at the speed of a sprint. It's not just a marathon, not a sprint. It's a marathon run at the speed of a sprint. So you've got to become a long distance runner. First of all, take care of yourself. It's critical to take care of your own immunity. It's critical to wear masks when you need to set the stage. But you've got to get your endurance going in every way you know how. And almost every CEO I work with almost have a kit. We have a kit on how you keep your immunity up and how you keep your energy up, how you keep going when even Fauci said that at the beginning got 3 hours sleep. until his wife put her foot down. Now he gets 6. So the other thing you want to do, that's double, is forget any assumptions you may have had about how things should work. Because right in crisis, all the assumptions are thrown out the door. That's what happens now when you don't know what you're going to be doing in June. You know what you'd like to be doing, but you have no idea, and it's going to change, and we're going to do it. On the other hand, though, the opposable mind, 2 things can be true. You still have to know that anything is possible. It is a quantum world, and there are a million possibilities in every nanosecond. Good things can still happen. Getting a therapeutic that attacks this, in 5 months could happen. Could happen more in 10, could happen more in 15, but nonetheless, these things could. So you don't want to give up your sense of optimism and agency, if you will, even if you can't always be sure you have it. Practice improvisation. I have an improv company that I bring in with boards and with executive teams. And we work to help people learn how to pivot. Everybody's talking about pivoting. Everybody's talking about that. But where do you really learn it? On your feet in improv, whether it's jazz or dance or theater. And so if you're home and you've got some time, find something on the internet, find something on YouTube, but also think about doing something in a more measured way. Lead with your purpose, values, and identity, personally and professionally, or professionally and personally. We've talked about that a little bit. And then, of course, the ultimate answer for chaos is embrace science. Science, my friends, is what will get us out of it. Real, true science, not fake science. And even in chaos theorists tell us that there, at the subatomic level, is a yearning toward order. Even in chaos, there is some order. Don't give up on that. And certainly just don't give up.
Davia, these are great.
So those are the lessons.
Great rules. Yeah. Let's go back to them, though, for a moment, if we can. So some of the news that one is communicating is not always good news, right? It's bad news. We're fine. We don't need 30 slides. But how do you deliver the bad news and still show compassion? How do you look at, and the Business Roundtable has grappled with this and come out with a statement, how do you measure profits and then people? How do you balance that, particularly when this is the unimaginable and unknown is still going to happen?
So you're asking a wonderful question, and we are all walking on a razor's edge right now. Every leader is walking on a razor's edge. So what people really want, I mean, they can think that they want fairy tales and, made up falsities, but what really calms you is the absolute utter truth, informed by reality, because you can know how to operate from there. So a true leader will be able to deliver bad news in a way that is compassionate, that thinks about and takes into consideration and talks about taking into consideration other aspects, but then goes right back to the fact that, listen, we all need this organization to survive. So I'm working with a CEO right now. I'll have him be nameless, an amazing CEO, very accomplished and very beloved and trusted by his people. And, they've done a number of things. They did have to have a round of layoffs. They tried to keep it good. They now, to be prudent, they've decided that they have to take salary cuts. What did they do? The first thing that he decided to do was cut his own salary and the board's salary more than anyone else's. So they're taking the biggest cut. And then it cascades down, and the folks who have to be on the line in the office, in the factories, whatever, get no cut at all. In fact, they may very well get a bonus. Yep. So I think that is those are the kinds of things that show how you can do both, and you can do both. I think it's when you give up and you say, listen, I just got to tell them what it is, and I got to just, talk turkey. You forget to inform it with the humanity and compassion. Another thing, by the way, another company, the way they've done it is what they decided to do. They have to do layoffs, but they're calling it furloughs. So therefore they can keep health insurance. Another company had to do layoffs, but they extended the health care of the folks that they were laying off in some way for 6 more months before it even went into COBRA. Yeah. So this is where you can learn to pivot. This is where you can put your humanity in ways. People will appreciate it. Nobody is unaware that we're in exigency right now.
It's interesting because
you're looking for the truth.
You hear in the news CEOs cutting their pay, boards cutting their pay, to avoid furloughs, to avoid decreases. I mean, I think it's been amazing too how some companies have come together to work together, the Googles and the Apples and others. And a lot of my clients, and I won't name one because then I'd have to name them all, but are doing such wonderful things, in terms of giving their employees a flat amount of money, and worldwide. It can cost them like $25 million to do this so that they can buy the paper and the cartridges for their printers, getting them an extra cell phone, or doing all sorts of things, including, counseling for the family. And with one company, if they can't, if somebody's quarantined, they'll put the family up in a hotel. So all these creative things that are going on to really show that compassion, because if you don't have people, what do you have, right? It's really your people make the company.
Exactly. And you can be creative. I'll tell you, I mean, I'm not quite able to give everybody such a huge stipend, but I've got this cushy pillow, microbead pillow that is very comforting and whatever. And I offered it to everybody in my company. I said, if you want it, I'll buy it for you. We'll get Amazon to deliver it. And I got people taking me up on it too. So, I mean, there are all kinds of ways you can actually try to meet people where they are. Mm-hmm. The other thing though, Janice, is it is stunning those who do it. It's stunning for those who don't do it.
Yes.
And there are companies who are doing exactly the opposite. We're forcing people to come in and have done it throughout the entire thing, even when their people don't need to be there.
Yes, so we have a question. I'm going to read it. So as the Boys Club protects its own in a tighter market, what can women do to get a seat at the table?
What a good
and this person is saying that, well, sometimes the words are there, but the actions aren't. So how do women get a seat at the table?
Well, let me tell you first the worry that I have, and I have it as a huge worry. So in crisis,
I'm sorry, I don't know if you're speaking up enough. We may be losing you. Just speak right into the microphone. You're a little low there. I just want to make sure our audience can hear you. Yeah.
Okay. Sure. Thank you. Can you see me too? Is it working? Okay, good. Because, technology fails you. By the way, rule number 5 of my crisis rules is redundant systems. In rocket science, you always have redundant systems, right? In anything that's mission critical, you've got to have technological redundancy. Now we are stretching this plastic very thin amongst all of us, but I'll yell, I'll talk up right.
So go ahead with answering the question, yeah.
Okay, so in crisis, people tend to revert to wanting to be around people who are just like them. They don't want to talk too much about, I'm talking about sort of maybe the boys club, but they don't want to have to debate everything from a diverse angle and from something else. They want easy, they want shorthand, they want field marshal kinds of things. Take that, he'll do that, go there, whatever else. Let's not have any lag in translation. This does not serve women well, because the guys then revert to guys. Now, women can revert to women. After all, we're the ones on this webinar right now. But it's sort of like wants like, which is the exact opposite of a diverse and inclusive society. So my first piece of advice is for everyone is be a little bit less combative and less sort of with it on your shoulder. I am the female, I am the whatever. This may be controversial, but I'll say it anyway. Get a little bit more with the overall program, which is to conquer this crisis. because we need the women's voices in the room. Otherwise, we will not have workplaces that work for women, as Catalyst would say. We will not have a voice for flex time or job sharing or many of the kinds of things that would be actually very, very helpful. So forcible, yes. In there, yes, but also a solution-driven contributor on the board and in every organization. So in every level you're at, just be solution-driven, relentlessly contributing. That's the best way to have anybody want you on their team in crisis.
And we know that one woman at the table is not enough. You have to have more than that, which is why we focus our executive searches on putting more women in underrepresented groups. But it's interesting that the countries run by women, I think it's 7 or 8 was just recently noted, they are doing best in this pandemic than the other countries because they're taking charge. And it's not like, now who gets credit? Let's get it done. So it's really interesting. So and there's another question. As a leader, what kind of signs should you be looking for to make sure you do not suffer from burnout when your leadership is needed the most?
Well, let me tell you. A little bit of
that kit you were saying to keep yourself healthy.
Let me tell you, at some point, every leader is going to get stretched beyond the breaking point right now. There is no doubt. People are dying. They're dying. I mean, there are horror stories. And when it really hits you is when those horror stories come home. So there's another CEO with whom I work. And she has made it her business to talk to every single one of her employees. Now, it's a middle-sized company, but it is not small. Mm-hmm. And she keeps notes. She keeps who has in their family is ill, who has passed away, whatever is their situation. And she refers back. So she goes over and over again. She refers back. She adds humanity. What can we do to get you centered? This is the thing. How do you monitor yourself? Physician, heal thyself. Leader, lead thyself. You are not going to get a full night's sleep any night of the week. You don't even think about that, because if you think about that, then you'll be upset that you're not getting it, and you won't. However, what you do is you take every vitamin on the face of the earth. You get zinc. By the way, my personal answer for to start to address some of the coronavirus is zinc, Zicam, or it's hard to find now, because all coronaviruses in colds, they're affected by zinc, and actually people have found that does work. That really does. There you can have a plan to take quick naps. You can set that off on your calendar. You can turn off. You can do a number of things, but I think unfortunately, right now, the real answer is you have to just power through burnout.
Yeah. It's a little like financial crisis, right? The financial crisis with boards and CEOs who are on the phone, nonstop. So, but it is interesting. I see so many of my clients really rallying, and a lot of them are women who are on the board or in the C-suite, and their DNA is such, and somebody's saying this in a question, they really tend and befriend, and they really are out there sort of nurturing and coming up with really great solutions. So I think it's always about having a balance at the table, isn't it, Davia? I mean, men, women, a very diverse group to make the best decisions, and being transparent, as we're seeing with our governor, and telling the truth to come up with the answers that are going to be the solutions, but always looking what's going to be around the corner, right? Because you don't know. You really don't know.
And a continual asking of how can I make it better? Not doubling down. If you've made a decision that didn't work, jettison it. Go to the next. That's really what it takes in these totally unpredictable situations. And women are good in those situations.
As those country leaders, though, they're doing a great job. So
they're listening.
So there's another question. Davia, you talked about leading with the truth, but like the wonderful Dr. Fauci, sometimes those with whom you're working with or in the leadership cannot handle the truth. That's a great question. How might you break through that? That's great.
Yeah. So it is a great question, and it depends. I want to be careful and not only speaking about the White House. But so I was I belonged to the Economic Club, and Dr. Fauci actually did a briefing for the Economic Club with the head of Carlisle, and basically he said, "Oh no, the president and I have a great relationship. He's going to be a little bit moderate, Fauci, because he can't make overstatements. He can't say that we know you'll have immunity, even if we almost know you'll have immunity. Because if you don't have immunity, it would be worse to be promising people they'll have it if there's a possibility that they won't." So there is politics in everything having to do with this. I think in the end, truth tellers have to be truth tellers. And hopefully the populace will demand that there is a truth teller at the helm to be able to guide us with eyes wide open. But I think the real medal of courage goes to those people in any administration who stand up to people who would live in fairy tale land.
It does come down to great character, doesn't it? And courage. We have 10 C's on our website. We start with character, because if you don't have that and the integrity and the courage, it just doesn't work. There's another great question. What can one do with lack of transparency in decision-making to overcome what appears to those not in the know as paralysis?
Yeah. So I think you can talk about intent, and I think you can talk about micro decisions. So one of the ways to do this when people really aren't understanding what's going on, and maybe they can't because we live in an opaque world. I keep thinking that my next Forbes article that I want to write is going to be called "In Praise of Opacity," because there's some things that need to be opaque.
I'm sorry.
Not everything. You can't open your...
In praise of what?
In praise of opacity. Opacity. Being opaque. So instead of in praise of transparency, in praise of the opposite. Some things you cannot make transparent. Right? But what you can do is you can talk about the situation. You can talk about what your intent is. You can talk about some of the micro decisions that you are making. And you can talk and you can sort of chart a course without telling people where you are on that course. If you must, I don't recommend it as the best way to do things, but there are times when you must do that. And at that point, you talk about intent. At that point, you talk about purpose, and you generalize it out. You're still going to come under criticism, by the way. Criticism is just part of what goes on.
So I'm going to close with one last question that our audience came up with, and I think it's great. How do you approach a CEO, and I'll broaden that to a leader, a manager, a CEO, who is clueless that they need to listen to others and get advice? How do you go and be that messenger, not get shot, right? And let them know, hey, this is not the way to go. There's an alternative way. Let's talk about that. How do you do that?
Well, look. First, God and the devil are in the details. So as a psychologist by training, I will tell you that every person is going to react differently to that. And for every person you want to do that with, there's a different set of answers. What I might think about doing is starting to get the best advice and compile it that others have given in from other companies, from benchmarks, from whatever. And so, here's the advice other people are getting. Mm-hmm. Is that sufficient for you, or would you like to listen to a few more people, maybe from our organization or our feeder organizations, our consultants? I can have them here in an hour. Or I can have them talking to you in an hour. Tee up something that shows competitively what other people are doing to get competitive juices flowing. Mm-hmm. And show how it will rebound to their best interest, as well as the best interest of the team. Yep.
The other thing is we could slip your name under that CEO's door and say, call Davia Temin, and you'll advise that CEO. And I think there are a lot of CEOs who really aren't sure of what to do. And like somebody in their question said, it seems like it's paralysis. Well, sometimes you can't be totally transparent. Sometimes you don't have all the information and you're making some intuitive calls, but hopefully a bit on science and information you're getting from others. So any parting words, because I know we're running out of time here.
So if you want to be the trustworthy voice in the audience, in the room, you have to have trustworthy voices that are talking into your ears. So you want to prepare, not with some huge crisis plan that is you're going to have to completely change every time another crisis happens, but with directional. These are the people in my organization and outside of it who I have at the ready when something goes wrong. I trust them. I know how they operate. We operate well as a team. We deploy. We do maneuvers together, if you will, in the Army kind of way. And I know how I've got it wired. So if these people are feeding everything into me and our board, I can feed that to all our constituents.
Davia Temin, thank you for the articles you've written, which are all on your website, on my website as well, for the advice you've given us today. And I think we're going to have to revisit this in a few months to see where we are. But, leading through chaos, leading through crisis, it's all about trust. It's a very big word, but I think all of us want to live up to that. So thank you for your advice today. And thank you to our audience for joining us for another webinar series with Davia Temin.